I mentioned a couple of days ago that both Poland and Ireland saw significant political upheaval as a consequence of a woman dying from not being able to get an abortion after both those countries had, had draconian laws against abortion. And asked the question, will that, when women start dying here in the United States, are we going to pay attention? And there is every reason to believe that women have been dying as a result of a lack of access to abortions here in the United States over the last couple of years since the Dobbs decision. I believe it was almost 2 years ago. And now we've got a name. The New Yorker just published an article by Stefania Taladrid titled, "Did an Abortion Ban Cost a Young Texas Woman Her Life?" They're talking about a woman named Jennifer Alvarez Estrada Glick. She died on June 10th of 2022, so it's a year and a half ago. She was married. She died in Luling, Texas. And she had this is a young woman who had a high-risk pregnancy. Where Luling is situated, they've got a hospital, it's got an emergency room, it's got 4 beds and 1 doctor, and they have no obstetric program, no ability to deal with pregnant women. And this reporter writes, by 2022, 2 hospital employees told me, the number of women giving birth in the Luling ER was surging. Now, this is the consequence of the Supreme Court's Dobbs decision, striking down Roe v. Wade. They recall seeing only 5 or 6 births in the previous decade. So in a 10-year period, only 5 or 6 times was the emergency room used as a birthing room. Now it felt like uncontrolled chaos, one of them said. Babies were being delivered in the waiting room or crowning on a stretcher in the hallway, the 4 beds being occupied. Women were coming in with more varied and complex conditions. Multiple doctors told me the overturning of Roe v. Wade in June of 2022 exacerbated the crisis as practitioners retired early or moved to states where they'd have more liberty to make medical judgments. So not only are these laws themselves killing women or leading to situations that put women at tremendous risk, but they're also causing the number of doctors who can deliver babies in red states to decline because these doctors are going, I'm getting the hell out of here. I mean, who wants to be facing jail? So 7 weeks into her pregnancy in late January 2022, Yenny messaged her husband's slight breathing problem. She raced to the ER where her case was termed a threatened miscarriage. An ultrasound showed her fetus was normal, but her blood pressure was spiking. It was 185/98. That's high. That's really high. But according to Yenny's medical records, doctors didn't raise the possibility of a therapeutic abortion with her. Why? Well, because she was at a Catholic hospital. They don't do abortions. And also because she was in Texas, and you don't do abortions in Texas. And so the bottom line is that this young woman died, and as a consequence of her pregnancy. And I'm surprised, frankly. I mean, I saw this story in the New Yorker. New Yorker is not an obscure publication. And I'm surprised that there hasn't been more coverage of it in the media and that it hasn't been, more aggressively highlighted by the media. I don't know if the media, one of the problems we have right now in the United States in general is that our media no longer is doing news. That what drives media decisions more and more and more in the quote news space is not, is this important, or is this informative, or is this the kind of thing people need to know in order to have a functioning democracy, but rather, will this get us a lot of clicks? And Yenny is, she's Hispanic and she is terribly overweight. And so she's not the kind of poster child, cute young woman that the media would like to have as the face. I think this is why Ms. Cox, who was her first name Christine, as I recall, I'm not sure, You know, the young woman in Texas, the attractive blonde woman in Texas who had to leave the state to get an abortion, she was kind of a media star there for a couple of days after she published her picture. And I think that our media, our press, has gotten so shallow, so obsessed with appearance, so concerned about, you know, who their audience is and what's going to get them clicks, that these stories are being largely ignored. And I think this is something that's frankly very dangerous to America. You know, back to the original rant from the first hour about it's time to bring back the fairness doctrine. I really think it is. Meanwhile, Maine's Secretary of State, Shenna Bellows, was swatted over the weekend. Somebody placed a hoax phone call. The justices on the Colorado Supreme Court that took Trump off the ballot, they faced death threats. Shenna Bellows was swatted, as I mentioned. We're seeing this all over the country, that these right-wingers are using the police. You know, their hope is that the police will kill people. That, you know, I mean, one of the guys who started the, I think it was Rick Wilson, I'd have to go back and look, but it was one of the guys who started the Lincoln Project, just this morning sent out a newsletter on, you know, his Substack newsletter, talking about how he got swatted yesterday or the day before. And at 3 o'clock in the morning, he's sound asleep in bed with his wife, and hears pounding on the door and the phone ringing. And he hops up and runs downstairs and discovers that there's a bunch of cops in the front yard with their guns pointed at his front door. And now this is a guy who has a gun himself. And if he walked through that door with a gun in his hand, he may well be dead right now, which is exactly what the people who swatted him wanted. So here we have this, you know, this designed to terrorize. Terror is now the new tool of the Trump humpers. This. I mean, you know, it's always been, right? The Proud Boys, the Three Percenters, these brawling clubs, the various so-called militia movements. There's something about violence and the right wing that brings these two things together universally. Mussolini had his black shirts. They were volunteers. They were sort of like, you know, the Proud Boys. Hitler had his brown shirts. They were volunteers. In both cases, they started out as volunteers. They ultimately got incorporated into the official militias. And, you know, they go around beating people up. They beat up gay people. They beat up Jews. They beat up people of color. They would harass women. And we're seeing the same thing. And I think that, you know, Shenna Bellows said this is a campaign that is, quote, designed to terrorize anyone who goes against Trump, is absolutely true. Traces the question, what do we do about this? Other than, you know, aggressively prosecuting it, but what's going on here, I mean, there have been all these swattings and other, you know, targeted harassments of public officials, mostly Democrats. There's been a couple of Republicans who've been on the receiving end of this, mostly anti-Trump Republicans. And although there have been a few, you know, pro-Trump Republicans who've gotten it as well, but increasingly it's looking like it may be coming from outside the country. And, you know, the problem is with voice over internet protocol phones, VoIP phones, you can make a phone call to 911 in any town from anywhere in the world, and you can make it look like it's a local phone call. And, you know, you run it through a couple of Tor browsers, and nobody can figure out who you are or where you are. And I've just been surprised that it has taken so long for any law enforcement agencies to find any of the people who are behind this stuff. I mean, you've got Judge Chutkan, who got swatted. You got Jack Smith, who got swatted. I mean, they're playing with fire here. When you go after senior federal officials like this, they must have a real high level of sense of immunity or impunity, you know, certainty that they'll never be caught. Or they're people who are working for the Russian government or the Saudi government or the Chinese government or the Iranian government. I mean, you know, who knows? But this is going on. This is a thing right now. The Trump campaign and Trump followers and in general using terror against their political enemies. And, you know, I think between now and this time next year, it's going to get worse. Keep an eye on this. We'll be back with your phone calls right after this. It's 16 minutes past the hour here on the Thom Hartmann Program, helping you win the water cooler wars. We'll be right back.